rise. And I want to start by saying welcome and congratulations on being appointed to the new Housing Advisory Commission. The city do appreciate your involvement in local government. A reminder, if during the oath, if I say state your name, if you can state one at a time from left to right. So please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, and state your name.
I, Joanne.
Noel Cantu.
Peter Moss. Joanne Skinner.
Do solemnly affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. You may lower your hand now. Congratulations. Thank you. And now you may start the meeting.
All right, I am going to call the inaugural Housing Advisory Commission meeting to order for October 23rd. First, I will do a roll call. Commissioner Cantu?
Presente.
Commissioner Moss?
Here.
Commissioner Marks is absent. Commissioner Ramirez is absent. And Commissioner Skinner. Great. Next, I will read the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of the Legion. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to the indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. So the first item on our agenda is introductions. So this is an atypical agenda. But I did think if you can just go down the row, say a little bit about yourself, maybe a little background, your history with Albany, and why you decided to join the HAC. That would be great.
Do I need to speak into the...
Yes, please.
My name is Noel Cantu, and I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. Just a few things about myself. I'm not big on talking about myself very much. I'm 59 years old. I've lived in Albany for 20 years now as a renter. I'm a dialysis patient, so I'm disabled, but I feel like I want to give back to my community. I've been very political in the sense of raising my children. And so at this time in our history, I think we all need to sort of come together and work at trying to get to know one another through experience, but also through empathy. And I'm proud to be here, and I'm proud to have my daughter here, Marisol Cantu, who is also an activist in Richmond. So thank you, Mija, for being here. I love you very much, and I'm looking forward to working with all you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Peter Moss. I've been on this dais before. I had served as both in the council, planning and zoning. I guess that's it where I was on this dais. I and my wife have lived in Albany since the late 90s. Our child went through the Albany school system. I really love Albany. I'm a East Bay native and just love the East Bay in general, but I think Albany is a very special place to get to live. I am neither a tenant or a landlord, but I've been both in my life. Currently, I am a simple homeowner, but issues around housing were things that have interested me for a long time. I'm now a retired general contractor, and for quite a number of years, I've thought the Bay Area was falling short on the number of homes that it was producing, and we were going to run into some problems down the line. And I think we now have sort of the biggest issue that anyone can face in the Bay Area is housing. So I'm looking forward to this aspect of our, of housing in Albany. I'm hoping I'll be able to contribute something. I guess one small interesting thing about my background, as a student at Berkeley, I participated in a rent strike in the late 60s, and that ended up eventually getting Berkeley into rent control. So, that Berkeley was, probably one of the first cities in California anyway that really went big for rent control. So I do have some experience in that direction.
My name is Joanne Skinner. I'm an Albany resident since 2003, an East Bay resident since 1981, and I too love living in Albany. And what I love about it is the character, the small town feel that we have, and that it's close to everything. So I can ride my bike everywhere that I need to go, including to this meeting. I really love being able to ride my bike. I work as a sales rep. I sell medical equipment. That's what I do for my day job. I am a landlord. I have one unit because I have an ADU on my property. And I have been involved in political activism as a river conservationist since the 80s. So I'm just very interested in housing and in the idea that Albany could be a world-class city, really is already, but participating in more of that.
Great, and I will announce that another commissioner has arrived, and she has left the room to be sworn in. So in the meantime, I can just tell us a few words about myself. I am Leslie Mendez, and I am the planning manager within community development for the city of Albany. Been here a little less than a year and a half. Transitioned from a few Bay Area cities. Started my planning career in Pleasanton, then 13 years in Berkeley, couple of years in San Rafael before I came back to the East Bay. I'm an El Cerrito resident, and I love working for the city of Albany, and I have now the benefit of being not the staff liaison to the Planning and Zoning Commission, but now to the Housing Advisory Commission. So I want to thank you all for volunteering your time to participate. It was a long road getting here, and I am so excited that we have the commission fully seated, and you are all stellar, at least based on my initial interactions with you, so thank you. And if you don't mind, I apologize, we'll just wait a few minutes for Commissioner Marks. And I'll hand you your party favors.
introductions, and I
Yeah.
think
You're up.
You're up.
Okay, I've missed I'm so sorry. I didn't get the email notice about the meeting I need to talk to you about.
Okay, yep, sorry about that, yeah.
So, my name is Margie Marks. I've lived in Albany for over 30 years. I don't like living in a place where the houses all cost $1 million and you have to be a millionaire. I really want to live somewhere where people from all economic backgrounds and all walks of life can be able to live in the same city that I live in. And I'm not saying we have to lower prices, because I've heard that a lot from landlords, but I think we need to subsidize people to allow them to build homes or buy homes and live here. And so I really want to live in an Albany that's all inclusive, including income level and walks of life and race.
Great. And thank you for volunteering your time to be on the commission, and we'll work out your,
I'm so sorry.
no worries, I'm sorry, so we'll have to work out what email we don't have for you, so I'm glad you're here, thank you. All right, so next on the agenda is public comment, and this is for persons desiring to address the commission on social and economic justice item that is not on the agenda. And please note that each speaker is limited to up to 3 minutes. The Brown Act limits the advisory body's ability to take and/or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items may be referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. My name is Marisol Cantu. I am a resident of Richmond, just 2 years down, but I spent 20 years in and out of Albany. My brothers went to Albany Unified School District. I am a professor at Contra Costa College. That's where my parents met, and I'm very proud to be a student and alum of there. I currently serve as commissioner on the City of Richmond's Community Police Review Commission. Before that, I served 3 years on the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force. I hope to one day join the rent board when there is a vacancy. Unfortunately, there's not. My hope in the future is that Albany and this council and this commission takes the housing element plan extremely seriously in ensuring that community participation, in particular tenants' participation in the city, is a part of all aspects of the implementation of this plan. To me, there are so many tenants that are now unhoused. It is the crisis that we are facing of our day and age. And I know friends, I know students that often come directly from their cars, that are coming directly into the gym to take showers, and there is not an equitable, fair, just housing system. And my hope is that progressive Albany will actually become a model of housing practices in the near future. So I'm excited to continue to follow your work. I know a lot of people in Albany as well, so I'm excited to spread the word on your many community participation meetings. I yield my time.
Thank you. As there's no one else in the chambers or participating virtually, that closes public comment for non-agendized items. Next on the agenda is announcement, which are some time for staff and the commission members to make announcements. Again, my first announcement is just welcome. I was starting to feel this was not going to happen, so I'm just so grateful because we do have a lot of work ahead of us. This kind of goes at the end to our next meeting, but due to the holidays, we will not have a meeting in November or December. So we will start up again in the new year. The timing is not great in terms of momentum, but actually for me it's going to be helpful because we are going to dive right in, and I have a lot of work to do to prepare for our next meeting. I do wanted to mention just 2 measures on the ballot, just to keep aware, because it may inform our future agenda item, and one is our local measure R, which is a residential renter business supplemental special business license tax that, if passed, would place a tax on rental properties to provide for tenant rental assistance programs, residential rental code enforcement, legal assistance for tenants and landlords, and support rental provisions to avoid financial hardship. So as I go through our work program, you will see how that may kind of, if passed, inform part of our work program. The other one is State Proposition 33, which, if passed, would overturn Costa-Hawkins. Costa-Hawkins is the law that prohibits rent control on multifamily buildings that are newer than 1995 and/or single-family homes. So again, it will just inform, like, if the city were to choose certain rent stabilization measures, what the spectrum of who we could apply it to would be. So again, not an endorsement one way or the other, just two things that I will be looking at as we move forward. And that is the end of staff announcements, so I don't know if any of the commissioners have any announcements.
I'd like to announce that Prop 5 is on the state ballot, and it's a measure that right now, if you want to do any kind of building, whatever, a capital improvement, you need a 2/3 vote. And this would change it to a 50%, it might be 55%, but it will be much easier to get building projects passed if Prop 5, that we don't need the super majority, just a simple majority. That could inform our work too if it passes, hopefully.
Any other announcements? No, okay. I'm gonna get a drink of water. Okay, so for tonight as our first meeting, I have some presentations for you with a lot of just some background information. For some of you, this will be old hat. For some of you, it may not be. But I did think since this was the first meeting of this commission, it would be helpful to go through. Okay, so the first is, the following presentation is a brief overview on the origin of establishing the Housing Advisory Commission, or otherwise known as HAC. So California law does require that each city and county adopt a general plan guiding future growth, conservation, and development. The government code identifies 8 mandatory elements of the plan, which include land use, circulation, housing, conservation, open space, noise, safety, and environmental justice for those jurisdictions that have identified disadvantaged communities. The housing element is the only part of the general plan that must be submitted to the state for certification, a process that is performed by the State Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. Cities without certified housing elements face negative consequences, including limited access to state funding and increased vulnerability to costly lawsuits, penalties, and court injunctions. Our city's most recent housing element was approved by City Council last February unanimously, and it's called the 6th cycle housing element and covers the period of 2023 to 2031. On September 8th of last year, we finally received certification from HCD. So the housing element includes a housing action plan, and the plan includes the adopted policies and action programs that the city has committed to implementing over the next 8 years, and spans 6 overarching goals, which include equitable access to housing, housing production, special needs housing, elimination of housing constraints, fair housing and housing security, and housing administration and resources. So many of the policies and programs that the city will need to consider for implementation fall outside the purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission. These policies are expected to be controversial, particularly those programs that involve tenant protections. It was therefore determined that the formation of the HAC would provide for a dedicated commission to review and advise City Council and ensure that these important topics will receive the focus they warrant while simultaneously addressing community needs and values. City Council established the 5-member HAC on March 4th, 2024, and to ensure diversity of perspective, required that 1 member be a renter, 1 member be an affiliate of a local educational institution, 1 be a rental housing provider, and then there are 2 at-large members. So the charge of the commission is to advise the City Council on policies and strategies for implementation of the housing element programs related to tenant protections, fair and equitable access to housing, housing programs, rent review, administration, and resources that fall outside the purview of the Land Development and the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that is why HAC. If you have any questions about that, I'll open the floor to questions. No? And if there's any public comment on that item? Nope. We'll close public hearing and move on to the second presentation. There we go. Okay. So in your introduction email, well, maybe Commissioner Marks unfortunately didn't receive it, but you should have received a link with more detailed information. However, as this is the first meeting, and I think some of you are new commissioners, I wanted to provide a brief overview of the Brown Act. So the Brown Act was enacted in response to mounting public concerns in the last century over informal, undisclosed meetings held by local elected officials. In 1952, the San Francisco Chronicle published a 10-part article series entitled Your Secret Government. The series revealed that local agencies were frequently holding secret meetings or caucuses, even though state law had long required that business should be done in public. In response, Assemblymember Ralph M. Brown authored the Ralph M. Brown Act, a California law passed by the legislature in 1953. The Brown Act, which is located in California Government Code 54950 and following, guarantees the public's right to attend and participate in meetings of local legislative bodies. In particular, it requires public access to meetings, a means for public attendance and participation, and open and transparent deliberations and actions. The Brown Act applies to all legislative bodies which engage in decision-making or who hold an advisory capacity. This includes both elected and appointed bodies, standing committees, and to new members who are appointed but not yet seated. What is not covered are ad hoc committees or meetings amongst staff and the public. What is a meeting under the Brown Act? A meeting is when a majority of the members hear, discuss, or deliberate on any matter within their subject matter jurisdiction. Meetings can include retreats or workshops, as well as serial meetings, which I will get to in more detail in the next slide. Meetings usually don't include contact with constituents or staff, conferences, social or ceremonial events, provided you do not discuss business during those events. So what is a serial meeting? A serial meeting is the use of direct or indirect communication by a majority of the body, in this case the HAC, to discuss an item. Beyond talking in person or on phone, this can include emails or communication through intermediaries. One type of serial meeting is the chain or the daisy chain. This is when member A contacts member B to discuss or deliberate on any item, and member B contacts member C, and so on until a quorum has been involved. Another type of serial meeting is the hub and spoke, where an intermediary, such as a staff member, contacts at least a quorum of the members to discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item of business within the subject matter jurisdiction. As mentioned, serial meetings can happen through indirect communication, with the reply all email being an easy culprit. To prevent inadvertent serial meetings, you will therefore note that all email communication to the Commission is through a distribution list, and those on the distribution list are blocked from sending emails to it. You may, however, send any email to me directly. So what is required of a meeting? Meetings must be set at a regular time and location within the city limits. Meetings must have a notice and agenda, which state the time and place of the meeting, and item proposed for discussion. The agenda and notice must be posted in a publicly accessible place, as well as the website 72 hours in advance for a regular meeting and 24 hours in advance for a special meeting. If an item is not on the agenda, it may not be discussed. However, it is okay to provide limited response to public comments, to schedule future agenda items, and/or have staff commissioner announcements. As mentioned, all meetings must include an opportunity for public comment. Public is allowed to talk about anything. Members cannot. However, if not on the agenda, if mentioned, commissioners can only provide a brief response and may not engage in that discussion. It is okay to set reasonable time limits for public input. However, time limits should be consistent between people and between meetings. Generally, something like 3 minutes per person. However, if more than 10 people wish to speak, limit it to 2, and that would be at the that would be subject to the chair. And finally, speaker cards are optional. Anonymity is okay. People tend to like to speak their name and place, but they are not required to. So if there is a violation that you notice, you can notify me or the city clerk if you suspect a problem. The way to correct a violation can include sunshining the information, re-agendizing topics, and/or rescinding or reconsidering actions taken. The Brown Act is serious. A court can void any actions taken, enjoin future violations, grant attorney's fees, as well as there's criminal prosecution available for serious violations where intent to deprive the public of information is shown. So that ends my presentation. I do want to mention you were sent a link to a little more information on the Brown Act. Our city attorney also conducts an annual presentation that's probably a little more in-depth and would be able to answer some of the legal questions a little better every year. So when that is out, I will be sure to alert you as well as encourage you to attend. So with that, I wanted to know if anyone has any questions on the Brown Act. Yes?
This might not be related to the Brown Act, but when I was on a commission in the past, we were given a list of the other members and contact information. So if I individually wanted to contact, say, Peter, I had his information. Do you still do that, or is that not? I noticed individual emails used to be on the website, but they're not, so I don't know.
So yes, we do not do that. Obviously, if you all wish to share your emails amongst yourself, that's fine. I'm still going to highly encourage that any communication that you do is related to, can I get a ride to the commission meeting, and not talk about any item. Because like I said, a joint email or an email from one to the other that is forwarded to the third, all of a sudden is could be considered a Brown Act violation. So, yeah. Any other question? Nope. Okay. I'm going to open it to public comment if anyone has public comment. I'm looking at you. All right. So we'll close and we'll go to the presentation, the main presentation for tonight. And why don't I see it? Here it is. Oops. Okay. Thank you. Excellent. So, good evening. This following presentation is a deeper dive into the housing element and the implementation program. So there's going to be a little bit of repeat of information, but not too much, I hope. So as mentioned, California law does require that each city and county adopt a general plan, and which has the 8 mandatory elements, including the housing element, which is the only one that needs to be certified by the state through the Department of Housing and Community Development. Cities without certified housing elements face negative consequences, including limited access to state funding and increased vulnerability to costly lawsuits, penalties, and court jurisdictions. So the state legislature has declared that the availability of housing is of vital statewide importance, and the early attainment of decent housing and a suitable living environment for every Californian, including farm workers, is a priority of the highest order. The import of the housing element is to assist in the move toward attainment of this goal and assure that counties and cities recognize their responsibilities in contributing to the attainment of this statewide housing goal. So the housing element expresses the city policies for housing conservation, housing production, and affordable housing while taking into consideration economic, environmental, and fiscal factors along with community goals. The contents of the housing element are established by state law. Therefore, there are many prescriptive statutory requirements. The housing element does cover an 8-year planning period with the current or 6th cycle running from January of 2023 to January of 2031. And the housing element is subject to certification by HCD. So we mentioned the risks. So this, as mentioned, the city's housing element was adopted by council in February of 2023 and certified by HCD in September of 2023. So like many jurisdictions, Albany already started behind the front of the ball, whatever, seeing that our housing element was already certified almost a year into the cycle. And we were not last. That took a long time for HCD to get to the housing elements. So the housing elements are required to show how each city is able to accommodate its fair share of the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA. RHNA is the driving force behind each housing element. The RHNA process begins at the state level. HCD determines the projected housing need over an 8-year period for each region in California, including the 9-county Bay Area. The housing need for each region is broken down into 4 income categories: very low income, moderate income, and above moderate income, to ensure that housing is constructed for persons of all economic means. It is then up to the Association of Bay Area Governments, or ABAG, in its capacity as the Regional Council of Government, to disaggregate the RHNA to the 9 counties and 101 cities that comprise the Bay Area. Larger assignments go to more affluent or high-resource cities, including those nearer to urban centers. And I'm going to just stress that here affluent doesn't mean the wealth of the city or the populace. It means more the facilities that a city could provide, access to transportation, schools, and the like. So the RHNA allocation to the Bay Area for the 6th cycle was 2.35 times higher than the 5th cycle, estimating a need of 441,176 dwelling units for the 2023 to 2031 planning period. Albany received just 0.25% 0.25% of the regional allocation, or 1,114 units. This is roughly proportional to the city's share of the region's population. However, it is more than 3 times the number of units that Albany needed to plan for during the last cycle. So it's quite a bit more. This,
May I ask,
Yeah.
how close did we come to 335 units in the previous cycle?
that's a really good question. I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't know.
And, sort of related, but
Yes.
you might have an idea. Does the number for 23 to 31, is that in addition to whatever we made or not made, or does that reflect?
No, it's just that number for this cycle. So the one thing to be, every year the city does need to do an annual progress report to report to the state how well we have done in actually producing the housing. However, the cities in general don't produce housing. Every once in a while do, like we facilitated the development of the SAHA program. What cities do need to do is make sure there's adequate capacity within our city based on available land and the zoning of that land to accommodate our arena. So it doesn't become cumulative, but every year we do have to show whatever new one.
Possibility of meeting this number if the private sector steps up.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So, so the city's RHNA includes 308 units for very low income households, which are 30 to 50% of AMI, or the area median income. 178 units for low income households, which is 50 to 80% of the AMI. 175 units for moderate income households, which is 80 to 120% AMI, and 453 units for above moderate income, which are those households adjusted for size, earning more than 120% of the area median income. And for reference, the area median income for a family of 4 in Alameda County for 2023 was $147,900. Although not part of this RHNA allocation, AB 3093, which was signed by the governor this year, did create 2 new income categories to be applied to the regional housing needs determination. And these are acutely low income, which is that not exceeding 15% of AMI, and extremely low income, which is set at 30% of AMI, adjusted again for family size and revised annually. So I will expect that in our next cycle, our RHNA allocation will include those additional income categories. So this slide is a snapshot of the city's RHNA allocation for the past planning cycles, and the numbers are very small and difficult to read. However, just from a visual point of view, you can see that the one on the right, the bar on the right, is the 6-cycle allocation, which is significantly larger than the previous cycles. So, and this is statewide. It wasn't just Albany. Now, turning to the housing element itself, the housing element is organized into 6 chapters. The first chapter, Introduction, describes the requirements for the housing element and the process used to develop the document. The second chapter, Review of Previous Housing Elements, corresponds to a state requirement to evaluate the effectiveness of the previous housing element and identify the steps needed to address any deficiencies. The third chapter is Needs Assessment. It includes an analysis of demographics, income, affordability, employment, special housing needs, housing stock characteristics, and energy conservation. This information is used to assess current and anticipated housing needs in the city. The fourth chapter, Analysis of Housing Sites, describes the inventory of sites in Albany that could potentially support new housing during the planning period, and including an assessment of the potential for accessory dwelling units in the city. This chapter demonstrates the city's ability to accommodate Albany's fair share of the regional housing needs. The analysis of housing sites is often called opportunity sites. So if you hear the term opportunity sites, it is the list of sites within the city that have been identified with potential unit count attributed to each site. That show that we exceed our RHNA allocation. The fifth chapter, the analysis of constraints to housing production, identifies possible governmental and non-governmental constraints to housing development within our city. Among the governmental constraints analyzed are the zoning ordinance, standards for special housing types, design review requirements, building code and permit processing requirements, local fees, and site improvement requirements. The non-governmental constraints that are analyzed include availability of financing cost and availability of land, construction costs, and development below maximum allowable densities. Finally, the sixth chapter, Housing Goals, Policies, and Action, presents the city's official housing policies along with a series of measurable targets for 2023 through 2031. This cycle of the housing element is also subject to a state mandate to affirmatively further fair housing, or AFFH, pursuant to AB 686. This requires that lower income sites be geographically distributed in ways that foster integration and create affordable housing opportunities throughout high resource areas. This mandate affected the data and analysis in the element, the selection of housing sites, the community process used to create the element, and the policies and programs in the element itself. Therefore, the principle of promoting fair housing and greater access to housing for all residents is an overarching theme throughout the document. So as mentioned, Chapter 6 of the housing element outlines the city's housing goals, policies, and programs in what is called the Housing Action Plan for the maintenance, preservation, and development of housing. The action plan includes the 6 overarching goals previously mentioned of equitable access to housing, housing production, implementation programs, special housing needs, reducing housing constraints, fair housing and housing security, and housing resources and administration. Each goal has associated policies and programs for implementation. The city's housing element includes 57 adopted programs that span the 6 goals. And while some of the programs are as simple as initiating meetings with local and regional housing organizations and only have 1 or 2 action items associated with the program, other single programs have upwards of 12 to 15 associated actions under the umbrella of a single program. So while the total number of programs adopted is 57, there are likely closer to 80 or 90 individual action items adopted in the housing element. To manage the sheer number of programs and action items, staff created an initial phased implementation plan that was adopted by City Council to support the successful and meaningful outcomes. So staff developed the initial phased implementation plan using the following prioritization criteria. So first, each adopted housing element program includes an anticipated timeline for implementation. We focused on programs with timing listed for 2023 and 2024. Second, the certification letter we received from HCD identified 10 action items across the 6 housing element goals as priorities for implementation. And HCD will be following up with enforcement on these items, so we included them in our initial phasing. Third, we incorporated topics and programs that garnered significant community interest during housing element update and ongoing outreach. And finally, we also considered efficiencies across topics. Staff focused on related and complementary programs that have both efficiency and greater impact when studied and implemented together rather than siloed. Certain action programs such as just cause for eviction and anti-harassment, anti-displacement policies are often combined into a consolidated resolution or ordinance. The same is seen with rent stabilization and rent review or registries. And lastly, with all of these prioritization criteria, staff also strive to find a balance that incorporates larger resource-intensive programs, relationship building, long-term development goals, and low-hanging fruit. So with that, in the following slides, I will provide a summary of the programs proposed in each of the 3 implementation phases, and then go into more detail of the programs proposed for phase 1. I do want to mention that the housing element programs 5F, which is the affirmatively furthering fair housing education in historic context, and 5H, equitable inclusive outreach, are not explicitly included in any discrete phase, as we see them as ongoing efforts to be undertaken concurrently with all housing element implementation. So programs in phase 1 are focused on implementation of Housing Element Policy 5.9, tenant protections. The aim of this policy is to work proactively to avoid the displacement of tenants due to rising rents, temporary financial hardship, demolition or conversion of rental housing, eviction without cause, and other factors. During the planning period, the city will work with housing providers, property managers, and tenants to improve housing security and stability for Albany's renters. I should say the city and the HAC will. Phase 1 programs include 5C, which is to conduct an evaluation of the rent review and non-binding conciliation and mediation program, which the city established in 2018. This program requires rental property owners to register with the city and provide notices to tenants when increasing monthly rents of 5% or more. The findings of the evaluation are to be used to either make the rent review program more effective or replace it with more effective measures. Phase 1 also includes elements of Program 5.3, which is to complete an evaluation of potential measures to improve the housing security of low-income tenants, particularly those who are most vulnerable to displacement. I will note here that when you see programs or action items with a red star, these indicate that these programs were also prioritized by HCD in their housing certification letter. Program 5D is an example of a single program on paper, but is inclusive of 8 to 10 separate programs in actuality. Most of the programs have been grouped together as they are topics most commonly combined under one ordinance or resolution. And these include just cause for eviction, which was 5D, a policy establishing specific scenarios under which a property owner is permitted to issue an eviction notice. Non-discrimination and anti-harassment, 5D, which is protections for renters and homeowners from discrimination and harassment based on protected characteristics, such as age, race, religion, sexual identity. Rent stabilization, 5D, which is a law establishing a limit on how much property owners can increase rent each year. And access to legal counsel, 5D, resources, referrals, or funding for landlords and tenants to access legal counsel for housing disputes. Turning to phase 2, this includes relocation assistance, 5D, again, maybe bumped up to phase 1, depending on results of the election. ADU affordability incentives, that's 1J. Measure K modifications, 2B. Measure K is the 1994 voter-approved ballot measure that reduced the density on the Albany Hill by almost half to what it was previously. The San Pablo Avenue Specific Plan Monitoring and Implementation, which is 2D. Revisions to the Inclusionary Zoning Ordinance, which is 2C. In collaboration with nonprofits, which is 6E. In phase 3, programs include feasibility of a local housing voucher program, 5D, single-family zoning reform, 1A, R2 zoning district changes, which is 4B, residential care facilities, 3D, development disabilities, that is housing for folks with developmental disabilities, 3E, and emergency shelter, and low barrier navigation centers and single-room occupancy housing and employee housing, which is 3H. However, as I mentioned, our upcoming work plan for the HAC is phase 1. So those are our next steps, and starting in the new year, we will be jumping right into the programs listed on the screen. So we have a big task ahead of us. And that concludes my presentation. Oh, no worries. Are there any questions from the commission?
All of the things that we'll be reviewing are things that are on the books now. We have a program for legal aid, I believe. We have set some limits on rent increases and things, or?
No, we do have a rent review program, which is a non-binding mediation. We do not have a rent stabilization ordinance. So that is something the state did pass, AB 1433, don't quote me on the AB, that did cap rent increases to 10%. However, many jurisdictions have found that to be quite excessive and have capped rents at something lower than that. So we do not have that at the time. It's just if there is a rent increase of 5% or more, it does require a housing provider to enter into mediation if requested by the tenant.
So we have some aspect of this, but we don't have
Exactly. And we have I would call it a rent registry light, which is a little bit more of a volunteer rent registry. So we have some sort of aspects of the program. So the task when you read the housing element is not, you shall implement this. It's often the city shall look into the feasibility or the appropriateness. So that is the task before us. If it was, is to the feasibility and what is appropriate for our city based on existing conditions, what we hear both from the public as a large.
And right now, a lot of the things that we're talking about, are, to the degree that we're doing it, is done by ECHO.
The rent, the remediation, yes, is done through ECHO. Yeah. Yes.
I just feel like I can't sit here and stay silent about the rent review program. It's a total failure. I know we're not.
This is a time for questions. So if you want to,
Okay.
if you have any questions about it, and I think we should discuss that when it comes up on our agenda in January. Yeah, but if you have any questions about the presentation, that would be.
Echo, what is Echo?
Oh, good. East Bay Consortium Housing Organization. So they are a nonprofit entity that does a lot of work in terms of helping tenants as well as providing services to jurisdictions such as the city of Albany, and really are invaluable in the work they do, just working on tenant disputes. Yeah.
And they work with Piedmont, a few communities, but they don't work with the entire East Bay.
No, it's yes, it's if a jurisdiction chooses to, enter into a contract with them. And it, again, I won't go into mine, but they've done a great job with their end, so. Yes,
You spoke to us having another meeting in January.
correct.
I'm under the assumption that our term ends this year.
It does, so that's the crazy thing. Thank you for coming. So,
Grandfather is
thank you. I was like, I wanted to bring it up, and everyone's like, don't bring it up. So thank you for bringing it up. So yes, every election year, all commissioners are officially need to renew. The city clerk is going to get back to you on how that is, since this is just such a recent assignment. But until the election results come out, there was just not a way that I could garner definitive information on how that would work. So all I can say is my goal is to keep you all.
But what election results are you,
The city council, there's 3 seats open.
and those 3 seats could.
So this is, each jurisdiction does it differently. So the city of Albany, at every election for city council, which is every 2 years, all commissioners need to renew. And I think it provides an opportunity for newly elected officials to perhaps appoint new commissioners. So that's not as relevant to this commission, but some commission each.
Appointed, right?
You are, but you're appointed by the commission, by the council as a whole. So it's a little.
Individual.
Correct, but there are many commissions where each council member does appoint their commissioner. So that's the genesis of this. But because you are not and because you're new, there may be to be determined, yes.
So I presume that if if 4 or 5 of us come back, we'll be taking the oath again in January?
I believe so, but I will give you, I have no definitive information, so, yeah. Any other questions on the presentation before I open public comment?
I have one more question.
Yeah.
So the new city council then is seated in when?
It's my understanding they're seated in December.
First meeting in December is
Okay, and then it'll go on their agenda to decide what to do with this group?
I truly don't have the details of how it works. I do know, I did find this out, that all existing commissioners, there's like a 45-day, you're still on whatever commission you are.
Grace period.
Yes, so I will keep you all posted. Actually, the city clerk will keep us all posted, so,
Okay.
yes. All right, I'm going to open public comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Marisol for the record. Thanks so much for the presentation. I want to talk about framing. When you begin a statement that tenant protections are going to be controversial, you make it controversial. And so instead of saying that tenant protections will be equitable, will be community-centered, are needed, are mandated by the state, you immediately open yourself up to controversy. Housing, I think many people at the core believe housing is a right. And so I think a little work needs to do on the framing when you begin. The other, on the last slide, just cause for eviction, really, really critical. 5D, I hope that this commission looks at best practices because there are many, many best practice just cause for evictions across the state. This is not new. You don't need to make it up. I'm hoping that you're looking at the core. San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, Richmond all have it. Y'all are a little behind on that one. The other one I wanted to bring up was 5C, rent review. That is not the same as a rental assistant program or a rent program. The fact that a commissioner is already saying, we don't have to do this because, oh, it's already done. Why would you be here if it was already done? And the fact that that program, 5.C, allows for 5% and is voluntary, that is not a policy. That is not an ordinance. That is an issue that I hope this commission actually tackles. The other is access to counsel. 5D, hoping that it'll be transparent, it'll be brought to all tenants, landlords, and the legal assistants will actually be held accountable. And there will be language accessibility. There are many different languages spoken in this community. Looking at other, Richmond has the top 5 languages, all of their forms, interpreters and translators. Even this specifically could be translated. This meeting could be translated as well. The other part I wanted to bring in was 5.4. 5.4, I think it's D, the protected class, protected characteristics. I know that sex, gender were listed on there. I also wanted to bring up legal status, people that have faced parole, are on probation, formerly incarcerated. Also, many people are actually discriminated because of their housing status. So if they are unhoused, it is another barrier, and they often are discriminated against. Or if they are a renter, a low-income renter, they are also discriminated against. These are not protected classes, but I do think, as we're in the 21st century, that should be looked at, and it should be strengthened in this. Also, questions around budgetary items. I look forward to more.
Thank you. And that closes public comment. Any other discussion on that item from the commissioner?
I think work agenda is going to be really interesting. I think what goes on in, when the ballot measures are local propositions and state propositions, the way they go is going to have an impact, and will probably have an impact on the work of this commission. So in a way, it may not be such a terrible thing that we have until January to kind of digest what goes down in the election.
Great. All right, so next on the agenda is the election of the Housing Advisory Commission Chair and Vice Chair. So the chair is responsible for overseeing the public debate in a manner that encourages input while also facilitating the decision-making process. Responsibilities of the chair include reviewing agendas prior to the meetings, starting the meeting on time, managing time limits for agenda items, deciding questions of agenda order, ensuring the public understands the nature of the issues being discussed, keeping discussions focused and fair, soliciting opinions from all members of the commission, ensuring the full range of alternatives have been addressed during discussion, providing structure for addressing complicated issues, attempting to reach decisions efficiently, and announcing decisions. And then in the event of a temporary absence by the chair, the vice chair shall preside. Yes. Yes. So that is for you guys all to decide. You may either choose to elect a chair and a vice chair tonight, or you can think about it and bring it up at the next meeting. Originally, when we were going to start back in July, I was thinking we'll wait for everyone to come, but since the next meeting someone is missing as well, what I don't want is the way I ran the meeting would be really the job of the chair. So it is up to the commission to decide whether to wait, but it could be there would be a different absence, and at a certain point, I'm going to want you to choose a chair and a vice chair. So it is up to you because I appreciate that point as well. So this is yes, Commissioner Skinner.
Well, wouldn't we be re-sworn in again in January? Aren't we starting all over again in January? So we'll have to be re-sworn in, and then presumably do it all over again?
Well, in this case, I can see how that might be yes. So that might be a compelling argument towards holding off to January. However, in January, assuming and hoping you are all on the commission, and if any of you is absent, I do hope the remaining members will choose a chair and a vice chair, because I agree that everyone should have the opportunity to be. So, but we also don't want to appoint someone who's like, oh my goodness, I don't want to do that. So anyway, any other thoughts? I would
agree that
okay.
we should probably wait till January when there's at least 5 here. Although I would say Margie looks pretty comfortable there.
I'll be happy to support anyone. I don't want a leadership role. I'll say it right now.
Okay.
I will support anyone that wants to.
Well, why don't everyone think about it? Yes.
Okay, so then if we pick one tonight, chair and vice chair tonight, this is just logistics. And back in January, we could all just say, we're going to continue with that.
Yeah.
Assuming
Yes.
that we're all on it. And then that would allow that January meeting to be run by the chair, or if they're absent, the vice chair, as opposed to the staff, right?
Correct. I can also see, I'm a little not always sure about the protocol. The other thing I can look into doing is putting the election of the chair and the vice chair at the beginning of the meeting.
I think that would be
Yeah, so that we can,
best, particularly if we can get all 5 of us.
that would be amazing.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why just to wait, but doing it first.
Okay. So what I would like, just in case, I want a motion to continue. Great. Okay. I'm going to take a vote. Commissioner Cantu? Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Commissioner, all in favor? Okay, I'm going to just say it out loud, just because we do have virtual participation sometimes. And so Commissioner Moss says yes. Commissioner Marks? Yes. Commissioner Ramirez is absent, and Commissioner Skinner, yes.
Yes.
Great. All right, so as mentioned, our next meeting is January 22nd. And we are going to be diving in head first, so I'm excited. So in the meantime, any questions you have, reach out to me. Margie, we're going to connect to make sure you can reach out to me.
Will we get the packet, the information sooner than the Friday before, or do you think it's going to be the Friday before?
So the packet comes out at the earliest the Thursday before, and on work backed up weeks, it will be the Friday before.
Okay.
Yes. And there are times if there were something that were a lot to read. For instance, I don't know what it would be for this, but if it were an EIR that you had to review or something lengthy, we would give you more time. We would send it out earlier to give you more time to digest larger volumes of packet. So with that, it's 8:11. That concludes our meeting. Thank you all again. Thank you.